That's longer than my talk. You told me how many minutes. Okay. Today, of course, is our recognition of WMS. And frankly, I have to tell you that I am really intimidated when I heard Mother Harvey, in her crystal clear memory, talk about the history of the Women's Missionary Society. I was like, I will never be like that. 100 years old, Mother Harvey, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. So in addition, of course, to this being our 5th Sunday and WMS Sunday, this is towards the end of Women's History Month. I'm one of those people who really doesn't subscribe to the idea of a month. For me, the work we have to do is all the time.
Yes, Lord.
We can't just open up one month and do the work and then close the door until that another month, the next year comes around. So, but people who know me know that that's my orientation. But I know we have a lot to complain about, and that's not what I'm going to do today. New battles to be fought every day, and the idea of what we once thought was freedom is changing by the minute. Amen. Those of you who know me know very well that this is not my venue. I'm a behind-the-scenes person. I'm writing grants and proposals to get work done, but I am honored to be here. This is a familiar place for me. I was born and reared in a Christian Methodist Episcopal church, so I am a CME, and that's not Colored Methodist Episcopal. This is Christian Methodist Episcopal in Augusta, Georgia. I was a Sunday schooler, that is every Sunday we were in school, but also my summers were spent in the Leadership Training School Summer Institutes throughout the South, every single summer. It was a camp that was specifically designed to create leaders. So not understanding the significance of that until later, of course, in my life. We were action-driven doers of the word. My father, however, introduced the idea of the laity, the lay people, not the ministers, but the laity, to our table of bishops in the CME church. This was a struggle, mind you, and as a child, I would hear the battles between the various members of the community. But I got to type up the scripts and the documents that were circulated for the meetings. The Department of Lay Activities was formed within the CME church, had one of its first meetings in St. Louis, and I was able to go to that meeting as a child, my first trip to the Midwest. But the value was that it gave members, and especially women and young people, many more opportunities for involvement. I know it seems like I'm straying a bit, but I wanted to give you the context for understanding why my membership at St. Luke AME Church was not accidental. I'm a literary historian by training, as you know, and by practice, but I was born during the era of segregation, which, as you know, lasted much longer in the South than it did every place else. Still in the South and every place else. Thus, I'm one of those people who sees the both and version of history, not the either or. While segregation was a very divisive factor in the lives for many of us, it was also an opportunity for many of us as well. And I get into trouble a lot by taking that position. Our churches were not only centers of religious practice, but formal education and extensive public engagement. For example, it was the church that routinely hosted speakers and were open to the entire community. Male and female activists and noted intellectuals were always featured, like W.E. Du Bois and others, people I met and heard as a young child. St. Luke is no stranger to this practice. Pioneering activist and journalist Ida B. Wells spoke at this very church on June the 4th, 1895, Thanks to archival sleuth Jean Klein for that exact date. She tracked it down. It has been my honor to be a member of St. Luke for a whole host of reasons, many of which you already know. Being part of a faith-based community is essential for me, but it is no secret that my arrival in Lawrence and at KU had to do with Langston Hughes, whose childhood was spent in Lawrence and at St. Luke. He attended New York Elementary School right next door, and the late Chancellor Robert Hemingway was smart enough to add an important feature to my recruitment to KU. He, of course, was a noted scholar of African American literature and the first biographer of Zora Neale Hurston. So he was already thinking ahead that Hughes would turn 100 in 2002. So many of you know the rest of this story. His invitation to join the KU faculty doubled with his commitment to support a centennial, in other words, to produce the money. That sealed the deal for me. Many of you also know that a part of those 2002 events included St. Luke's prayer breakfast that November with special guest Alice Walker, as well as our state and federal government officials. This was before, of course, the St. Luke renovation, and of course, this was a hand-cooked meal. Ultimately, the fellowship hall, of course, was renamed after Langston Hughes. From my vantage point, St. Luke is already a bridge. We continue to find ways to model the behavior that I think is essential for any community today. We are creating, as you heard, the Langston Hughes Children's Library and renovating further downstairs under Pastor Rachel's leadership. Amen. We are a gift to Lawrence in this highly unpredictable era. Mm-hmm. We sit right next to New York School, now having transitioned into Lawrence School District's Adult Literacy Center. I don't know if anybody has noticed, but the social media for the center notes New York School's most famous alumnus, Langston Hughes. So I'd like to spend the rest of my time with what I believe is a far more important story to share for this Women's History Month and St. Luke's place in it. Many people befriended me who represented that bridge between KU and St. Luke. Dorothy Pennington, Joyce McCrae Pearson, and a host of others. One person, however, stood out, the late Mary E. Townsend. Mary had retired from KU, so she knew the ropes. A decade before my arrival in Kansas, but she was still rigorous in her critique and assessment of all things, and a devout Christian woman, clearly a force of nature. KU educated with a BA and master's degree, she immediately joined the Department of Social Work, later becoming the director of the Office of Minority Affairs. Long before DEI, Mary was working in the trenches. She also maintained a private practice in Lawrence. I met Mary and her sister Helen Hawkins, who took me under their wing as a neophyte Kansan and a clearly untutored Jayhawk. She had been retired from KU a decade by the time I arrived, but her work, in a sense, had only just begun. A committed Christian, Mary had spent a great deal of her time analyzing the role of women in the Bible, and had concluded that not only had many remained nameless or their names subsumed under the male, worse was the propensity, and this is a quote from the book, to categorize the nature of women by utilizing a Madonna-whore dichotomy that continues to be stereotypically defining women today in linguistically sexist terms that discriminate against and devalue them. And this is before we turned into the 21st century that Mary Townsend is talking about. She had been diligently working on the book in retirement, having come up with a plethora of terms used to describe women in the Bible, most commonly prostitute, whore, concubine, strumpet, harlot, slave, evil, unclean. This, she believed, created, in another quote from her, a sisterhood into two rival camps, the good and the bad. Mary's process, as she described it, was, and I quote, make every effort to individualize all the flesh and blood women in the biblical text. This was a major effort, but Mary was determined to make it her gift to the world. You can imagine how rich and detailed our conversations were. Mary, released from her duties at the university, her process was to add a phonetic spelling for each woman's name. Over the course of 22 years of teaching at KU before the 21st century, Mary had developed her own data management system, separating the historical events into a chronological timeline with 6 sections, starting with Israel's patriarchal system through the reigns of Saul, David, Solomon, and beyond, and split into 2 kingdoms, including the creation of Israel. Mary was, in my opinion, a born researcher, creating her own methods for uncovering and mapping knowledge for readers as the digital era had just begun to even be thought about. I discovered in watching her that she had also become an expert cartographer, knowing how to map. As she tells us, and I quote, the flesh and blood women of whom I write lived more than 3,000 years ago, in different times and different cultures, but their lives resemble the lives of contemporary women in that they confronted and dealt with similar female issues and problems of living. Hard times stemming from their lower class status, good times when their lives allowed them to be nurturing, compassionate beings, and in charge of domestic matters for which they were valued. But Mary quickly tells us in her intro volume, and the book is titled, Telling It Like It Is, the Truth About All the Women of the Bible, before you go off in a huff and color me a woman against women, let's face reality. We women are predisposed to giving care to others. Then she quickly adds, is this not the way Jesus was when he walked this earth? He was the caregiver, par excellence, and urged others to do the same. Because I had studied the Bible in my college with a range of courses in religion and philosophy, I was fascinated by Mary's systematic approach that readers could understand. Our work seemed similar, except that I was working with literary data, not biblical, although the Bible is literature. To be sure, Mary provided an example that could not be ignored. Her blend of religious fervor and historical analysis led her to a data-based approach that sealed our partnership, just as she helped me find my place at KU. St. Luke was the foundation for it all. We created a 3-person team for her. The late Barbara Watkins became the editor, Sarah Arbuthnot Lent, the technical editor and assistant, and me navigating the publishing process for her. The book appeared in 2005, a year before she passed. Mary Townsend had taught 3 major courses over the time of her career: the psychology of women, psychology and social issues, and African American families, a psychological approach. Now staples at the university. She opened up a world and insists that we seek the truth in a context that is, first, community-driven, second, inspired by faith, and third, producing new knowledge. I recommend without hesitation that we prepare a new introduction to the book, a reprinted edition bearing St. Luke's imprint, and that we honor her spirit that is embedded in St. Luke. Mary Townsend was a woman who made a difference. Thank you.